I think they're under pressure. They're under severe pressure. You have to look at it from the Taliban's imperative. What is the most important thing they need at this point in time? They want to consolidate their government. It's 4 years old, a little over 4 years old, and they're struggling. Struggling definitely on the financial side, and that's what makes the world go round. And so, if you don't have the cash, then you will behave accordingly. And so, I think that that is an imperative, which is why they're ready to talk. But then there are constraints as well. So one, you have the imperative, but the constraint is that you can't actually stop the TTP because they're your own family. They're an extension of you just on the other side of the border with Pakistan. And what you created on your side, the emirate, they want to create like a sister or mini emirate on the Pakistani side. And it's in your interest, but it's one thing what you want and what you can have. And so you are stuck between the need to do business with the world and to ideological commitment. This is something I wrote about very early on in August of 2021 in the Wall Street Journal as soon as the Taliban took power. In fact, actually before the Taliban actually took power. And so this is something that they're not going to escape. So you can have meetings, you can have Turkey, mediate, the Qataris mediate, others, but ultimately this is not something that the Pakistanis and the Afghan Taliban can solve in the short term. Oh, absolutely. And I would actually say that they are taking advantage of Pakistan's constraints and the constraints of these regional actors and the US strategy as well, the new US geostrategy of not doing heavy lifting for security around the world and letting regional and allied and partner nations take the lead. So on one hand, they know that the Turks, the Saudis, the Qataris, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the UAE, they all want Pakistan to be focused on the Middle East, not on this border. So by creating a crisis on the western flank of Pakistan, you are basically drawing these other powers in and saying, okay, let's mediate. And what is the one, tradecraft that the Taliban know? They know how to foment violence. And through the fomenting of violence, which is a tool, it's not an end in itself, they are extracting concessions. So, on one hand, yes, they have this long-term problem, as I mentioned earlier, to keep supporting the TTP. But the short term, the immediate problem is we need cash and fast. And so you use the tool that's in your kit that you know well. You don't do anything else because you don't have any other way of dealing and attracting international attention. So when these actors go to the Taliban and say, "Hey, what will it take for you to put an end to this or to, at least bring a pause to it?" And they'll say, well, what's in it for us? And, what can you do for us? And at the end of the day, let's be very crude about it. They need money and they can use that part of that money to bribe the TTP to go quiet for a while. So, money makes things happen. So they know that the Saudis and the Qataris, the Gulf Arab states that are wealthy, they're willing to put money into this. In the meantime, they know that the Americans need the Pakistani attention in the Middle East. They need Pakistan to be a much more, if you will, effective ally than it has been in the past. So you draw the American attention in. The Americans have not been willing to play ball with you. So this is another way to say, hey, we can make this. It's a signaling because they know at the end of the day, the Trump White House will come and say, guys, knock it off. What will it take for you to knock it off? And therefore, the Taliban are deploying these tools. This is the only tool they have in their kit. I think if you judge, I don't know what's happening behind the scenes. I can't claim what the conversation is in Pindi and Islamabad. But I do see action and I do see behavior that suggests actually quite clearly that the Pakistanis know that in the long run, they will have to have a long-term military strategy for this, which could include a buffer zone, which could include forward operating positions, et cetera, et cetera. But they're not there yet. And so before you get there, and you have to sort of balance because you're wanted in Gaza, you're wanted in the Middle East, you have the eastern border, you have all your existing commitments and new ones. And then there's this, the need to go on the offensive with the Afghan Taliban, because deep down, you can meet the Afghan Taliban if you're the Pakistanis and vice versa, and you can shake hands and talk nicely and sign on the dotted line. But at the end of the day, it's a piece of paper. And so they know that this is a long-term problem, that we will be dealing with this for many, many years, if not decades to come. So both sides have to gear up militarily. But in the short term, both sides need respite. They have other things that they need to deal with. So it's in the interest to kind of like have like a pause, a calm, for however long it lasts. It is the same problem the Americans had when they were asking the Taliban. This is before the deal that the Trump White House did in its first term with the Taliban. Is that the big question was, how do we know for sure that you are basically, setting your pulling away from Al Qaeda? How do we know that for sure? Because your relations go very deep, and they've been in play for decades. So how do we know that? Same problem Pakistanis are facing now. TTP are your relatives, your cousins, your brothers, your fellow tribesmen, kindred spirits in terms of ideology, and et cetera, et cetera. And so how do we know that you will actually deliver on what you actually are saying? So you're talking the talk, but can you walk the walk? And if I was Pindi Islamabad, I wouldn't trust anything coming out of the other side. I'll take it one day at a time, and you trust only after you verify. It's difficult to say. Uh, I don't think that they're going to easily accept that. That's not sort of like, hey, the first time we hear it, we're going to say yes, thumbs up. That's not happening. They'll drag their feet on it because, no country, however weak or strong, does not want any other country to have so much, if you will, inroads into their processes. So, and this is like dirty laundry that the Taliban do not want to air. Uh, and so why would they? I think that at best it would be Chinese influence. I mean, keep in mind that these attacks on Pakistan are not for necessarily sort of the target audience is not just Pakistan, or the target set is not just Pakistan. It is also designed to gain the attention of the Chinese. The Chinese have sort of like said, hey, we do business in a lot of, hostile places. We're far more, if you will, willing. Our threshold for risk is higher than those of the West, those of the Americans. But even us look at this and say, hey, uh, we really can't do business in this country. And so that's why you had an NPR report quoting an unnamed Chinese official as saying, describing the Taliban way of doing business as banditry. And so the Chinese have been essentially, off-put by this. So if you're the Taliban, you strike in Pakistan because you know at the end of the day, the Pakistanis are not going to come to you alone. They're going to bring the Chinese along, and that's exactly what the Taliban want. The Chinese come in and say, "Hey guys, look, we have investments in Pakistan, and they're not that's not small change. It's like tens of billions of dollars. We even want to do business with you guys, but we're not getting anywhere there. So come on, stop this." And they'll say, "Yeah, we can stop this, but we need something in return." And that's hard. We need you to invest money in our country. And so this is kind of like, strong arming, if you will, if you had to use an Urdu term, it's called battahori, and this is exactly what they're doing because this is all they know. They're not well developed as a political movement, much less having sophisticated economic statecraft where they will sort of negotiate. Well, they don't have much to offer. I mean, they have a country that a lot of people around the world, most countries, are like saying, okay, how can we manage this? This is very fragile. Handle with care. But they're not leaping to come in to do business with them. They're just managing it. So, and they can't turn that reputation around on a dime. And so this is the only way they can get what they need, or at least try to get what they need. So money does wonders. I mean, look, I mean, if you pour money into it, I mean, that's the thing. Pakistan doesn't have money to give them, so it's going to be the Chinese money. The Americans are not coming, with their investments. And the Saudis and have their own hands full, and the Gulf states with Syria and Gaza. It's demanding a lot of their financial bandwidth. So it's only the Chinese that are going to come in. And so if there is money involved, I have to believe that, as ideological as they will be incentivized to find ways to kind of like keep it quiet, if you will. So if you think about it, you get money, you have a lot more bandwidth, you take care of your domestic problems. You also are sponsors of the TTP. You pass along some of that cash to the TTP and say, guys, have fun, okay? Calm down. We don't need to fight right now. Let's enjoy the moment. And so if money comes, I see them doing this. But ultimately, it's not the end. It's like a temporary reprieve until the next time, because ultimately their nature hasn't changed. Their nature, it's that eternal balancing, and it's difficult. Commitment to ideology and pragmatism. You got to govern, you got to run an economy, you got to deal with the world, but you can't change who you are. I mean, we're seeing this in their treatment with women. I mean, look, how much pressure there is from the international community uh, to improve their attitude towards women, but they're not budging. And part of the reason why they're not budging is, you said, domestic politics. They're divided themselves. So you have the Habatullah camp in Kandahar that basically says, no way, Jose, we're not budging 1 inch on our commitment to ideology. Those in Kabul, those who meet with the international community and they get an earful, then they're saying, but we can't run a government if you keep doing this. And so there is this back and forth, and it doesn't go anywhere because ultimately any entity is risk averse. You don't want to try and do something that you cannot control. I mean, look at Saudi Arabia. It took decades for them to actually say, you know what, we're going to actually issue a license to women for them to be able to drive, and we're going to get rid of these restrictions. And it took, a long time. Essentially all the sons of Abdulaziz who founded the kingdom were not able to do it. It was a third generation prince, Mohammed bin Salman, who said, you know what, I don't care about this. And I don't think that the sky will fall, and I'm willing to do it. I mean, you have the Iranians doing the same thing. They don't want to pull back from their ideology either because they don't know what that world looks like. The Taliban are the most primitive in this sort of ideological Islamist space. They have far less of an incentive to do that. So you need money. You can't change who you are, hence the situation that we're in. Oh, it's very fragile. I mean, I'd say it can be broken in a heartbeat. You don't control everybody. Um, you, and this, we don't know what that decision making mechanism look like. Look, it's not a chain of command. These are sort of diffuse elements. So, okay, so Mullah Hibatullah is saying, yeah, calm it down for a while, but we're not giving up on our commitment. And so he's speaking it from both ends of his mouth. The imperative of those in Kabul is to say, guys, knock it off, okay, for now. We'll get back to you. And the people, the TTP, are looking at this and saying, are we going to be thrown under the bus because of this? And so there's just so many cooks in this kitchen that you can't sort of give an order from top and then expect it will be followed, with like precision. It's not. And so it is fragile. We can start fighting. We can start seeing fighting in a heartbeat, as I said earlier. But at the end of the day, look, this is a long-term problem. There is no solution to it. I think the Taliban know this. Pakistan knows this. Every other stakeholder knows this. They're taking it one day at a time, manage the situation because there isn't a solution. It's kind of like, okay, let's keep changing the bandages on a wound. Yes, both. They're doing both. I mean, they look, they're not very popular, at home. So something's got to give. You can't just sort of keep women away from school and work and suppress them in public life. You can't treat the minorities as second-class citizens. You can't run this emirate and hope everything will be fine. So you got to give something to the public. So when the public looks at this and says, so they have two things going for them. They say, hey, look, there was no security back when we were not in power. We have provided with you security, and we're dispensing justice. Second thing is, uh, we're not lackeys of Pakistan, as you've all, for all these years and decades you've called us. We are independent. We are Afghan nationalists. And so we will not, and this whole thing about, hey, we don't recognize the Durand Line serves them perfectly. And it keeps Pakistan under pressure. Look, at the end of the day, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan in its current form and the Islamic Republic of Pakistan cannot coexist. These are two separate, conflicting systems of government. What is Pakistan's worry? Pakistan's worry isn't necessarily just the violence. The violence is a problem, don't get me wrong. But the violence brings a breakdown of the fabric, the constitutional order in Pakistan. Pakistan doesn't want that Talibanization coming here. Now, flip that. If you're the Taliban, how can you keep your emirate next door to a system that is completely at odds with you? And your country, the country you're ruling Afghanistan for 20 years, was also a republic, had elections. There was something called a constitution. There were freedoms, and there was civil society. They can't govern that way. So this is an existential problem that Pakistan cannot run away from. It's unfortunately the outcome of a very massive strategic blunder of seeking strategic depth through actors who you thought were your proxies, but really what they were enemies of your own political system. And that I find I have a hard time sort of reconciling with that. How could you do that for so long? I think it's a long-term problem. There's just no solution to this. I mean, something's got to give. Pakistan cannot allow an emirate on its side. Pakistan cannot deal with these realities of these bouts of violence on their western flank. And it's not just the TTP. They're also providing safe harbor to Baloch separatists as well. So it's not one problem. There are multiple problems there. This is also the same geopolitical real estate in which CPEC is running through. And so you can't do all this and allow for this to happen. And therefore, I think that this is going to be with us. Look, this, Pakistan didn't get to this point overnight. Far from it. This is a half a century worth of policy, coming back to haunt you. So I don't want to make a prediction that it'll take another half a century to fix this, but it's going to take a long time. I can easily see this as a decades-long problem because ultimately, if the Taliban are going to change, if that society is going to evolve, if it's going to become much more representative of its people's aspiration, that's a multi-generational process. That's not going to happen. So Pakistan will have to live with this vulnerability and somehow find ways to manage it. It will be a huge draw on Pakistan's resources. That I can predict. I have sort of my view on it that, look, India can go only so far because A, it doesn't have a border. So how do you help? I mean, do you airlift help? You can give them some cash, but then there are sanctions on the Taliban regime, so you can't go too far. You're already at odds with the United States. You don't want to be further at odds. What is the utility? Let's just ask this question. What is the utility of India? Let's say they had, let's imagine that Pakistan and India sort their problems out. Okay. And then India can somehow Vaga opens up and the trade goes through Pakistan to Afghanistan, uh, and then to Central Asia. I mean, that's a long shot. First of all, the big if, can you improve relations with Pakistan? No, not in the short term. Uh, what about Afghanistan? I already said, even if you fix your relationship with Pakistan, there's still the Afghanistan problem. Right now, you don't have to deal with the Taliban. If you're India, you don't have to deal with this mess of attacks and whatnot. Pakistan is insulating you from that. It's taking the brunt of these attacks. So, do you really want to do business with these guys? No. This is just a way for the Indians to essentially have an anchor there, hoping that something will come out of it in terms of Central Asia. And it's, of course, a sore point for Pakistan. So it's kind of like leverage. But really, I don't think the Indians are playing a big role or can play a big role there. There's more optics and atmospherics than there is anything substantive. Now, yeah, you can do intelligence operations and whatnot, but that's tactical. There's nothing strategic here.